panellist here, Carole Malone, who was talking to me and distracting me.
I was talking to you because
I had to shush them.
You can't blame the guest.
No, but I was asking why, because we all went out to the Ballet last week.
We did.
And he was a little worse for wear, and he got on the wrong tube.
Shocking.
Which went right past his station.
No, I didn't get on the wrong tube. It just didn't stop where it was supposed to.
No, it did stop. It stopped for your husband, who had to get on a different tube. It stopped for him, not for you, though.
And so I ended up in Wembley. And had to
You
get
slept?
a cab home. No, I was standing up.
Wembley.
I was standing up.
You can sleep
Wembley.
standing up.
And I've no idea how to order an Uber, but fortunately I was able to flag a black cab.
Yes, well, thank God for you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'd still be in Wembley.
on to the real news.
The ballet was very nice, by the way. It's Matthew Bourne Swan
Swan
Lake.
Lake.
It's Matthew Bourne Swan Lake is just sublime, and it was at the
It was so moving. I've just sold it to Flossie. He's going to be booking a ticket now.
You should try and go, actually.
Maybe cry.
It is very lovely. Yeah, it always makes you cry.
Well, a little bit of ballet chat on GBNews. It's like a nice corrective to the notion that, it's the ballet's too work.
We do culture on GB News.
I feel a bit left out because I've never seen a ballet. So can we move on to Labour MPs in mutiny?
What are we doing?
Labour MPs in mutiny.
So this is the WASPI women's story. So of course,
up to 100 Labour MPs, Jonathan. Guardian says, if there's a vote, which the Labour government would contrive for there not to be a vote, but the Lib Dems are saying they can have an opposition day debate.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a binding vote.
It wouldn't be a binding vote, but it would be pretty dramatic if 100 MPs don't support their own government.
I think that look, I think on the raw policy here, I'm in a difficult position of a political commentator by being able to see both sides and both sides of the argument. Because on the one hand, there is the argument that these women should have done financial planning if they were making big decisions about their early retirement. Sure. And that, given the sort of constrained budgets at the moment, sort of potentially forking out £10 billion would not be an appropriate use of public money right now. And sort of pensioners, boomers or whatever the generation that you want to call them, have had a lot of privileges that my generation will not be able to have. And so there are all these arguments. On the other hand, there are clearly women who can demonstrate an injustice here and who point out statements by various Labour figures over the years to suggest that there would be some kind of corrective measure.
And
then obviously the ombudsman who made the recommendation, I think that's the key.
There was no suggestion, there was a promise by Labour, who, when they were campaigning to get into government, Rachel Reeves, Liz, Liz Kendall, and Angela Rayner, all saying these women should definitely and would get this money. Yeah, and this is a
and the Prime Minister.
You'd have thought after 6 months of lies and betrayals by this government, you wouldn't be shocked. But I'm still shocked by what Starmer has done here. I mean, he literally hates the British people. I'm sorry, and you said these women should have planned ahead. No, they did not know they had to plan ahead. Starmer said yesterday, completely incorrectly, that 90% of the women affected knew about the pension changes. The Ombudsman said
that the pension is going to be equalised with men.
That the pension was going to be equalised with men. The Ombudsman says that's simply not true, that 60%, only 60% knew. So you have the 40% who couldn't have planned ahead for something they didn't know was going to happen. So, you have these women, and they've campaigned for years, and governments have tried to kick the can down the road. The Tories literally tried to kick the can down the road too. They could have paid the compensation before they got kicked out, but they didn't. And now Starmer is saying, because of the economy, which he has messed up, because he says the economy is not stable now. It was stable when he took over.
But Carole, the proposed payment wouldn't anywhere near compensate for the loss of the pension over the number of years they were expecting. They're proposing £1,000 to £2,500 per person. Now, that's not an insignificant amount of money. Who wouldn't want to receive it? But nevertheless, it nowhere near compensates for it. So therefore, the cost to the taxpayer at a time when the country is massively in debt.
It's better than nout. And if you're a pensioner and you've got no money and someone's going to give you £2,000, that's a lot of money. That keeps your heating on.
It is the categoric guarantee from senior Labour figures.
I'm sorry.
There was. I'm sorry, you've not listened to the speeches.
Angela Rayner said...
This is a 2019. Yeah, that was a 2019 manifesto.
Angela Rayner said this money was stolen from these women.
She said that, look, she said that...
So she's changed her mind, has she?
Look, Angela Rayner...
It was stolen or it wasn't?
Look, if you're campaigning for government under Jeremy Corbyn, under the 2019 manifesto, there are obviously going to be different priorities. The Labour Party lost that election by a landslide because they were promising billions and billions of pounds they couldn't afford, and it was a complete disaster of a manifesto.
This is
so Starmer did not
billion.
include it in the manifesto.
But they didn't unpromise it.
Yes.
They did not unpromise it, Jonathan.
They hedged.
So
a bit.
why
I'm
are
not
all
saying-
these Labour MPs rebelling against this? Diane Abbott, who is a woman I never thought I'd say
Well, she's
agrees
the
about
and
anything.
she's the mother of the House.
She stood up and said, we promised these women justice. And they're not getting it. And loads of MPs have joined the ranks and they're behind her in this. Now, it's...
Carole, I was in the Commons yesterday and I talked to some Labour MPs. They were shocked.
Yeah.
I think that
And
They were,
ashamed.
they were completely shocked. There was no preparation for
Andrew,
it. She just stood up the Work and Pension Secretary and whacked them with this shock.
The problem, and this is a problem that we talked about in the past, it's a problem of political expectation management, political strategy, communication strategy. It wasn't in the manifesto. However, I can understand that there was an expectation by a lot of these women that something would be done by the new Labour government. Yeah, and there were obviously comments, and I agree there have been comments made since the 2019 election as well. There are no sort of absolute pledges, but there were certainly supportive comments. So if you are working on that, then there is an expectation that something might happen. So they should have managed that expectation and said, we can't guarantee anything because of the constraints.
If you can give train drivers and various other people nearly 10 billion quid's worth of pay rises, you can afford to pay these women. That's what the Labour government did the minute they got into power.
Do you think... So the most the government would have paid them was £1,000 each. They wanted £10,000 each.
Yeah.
Do you think, had they announced that they would have had £1,000 each, that this would have gone away?
Probably
Would
not
it
have gone
had
away.
Any political benefit from
But
that
as I said to you before, we're not in the position of being absolutely skint. If you're absolutely skint, £1,000, £2,000
But
keeps you
I'm
heating
talking about
on
the
for 6
WASPI
months.
campaign, though. The WASPI campaign that has been
Yes,
incredibly
and
successful.
you know what? Those women, I admire those women like I can't tell you, because they have fought successive governments for this. They're not letting it go, and I hope to God they don't let it go. They should use it to shame this government.
And also you have to remember, the independent ombudsman said they are entitled to compensation, but Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves know better.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's see what Nigel Farage says about it. Let's see what the Conservatives say about it. Is any party going to stand up and say we are
talking about who's in government?
All right, fine.
They hold the purse strings.
As Carole just pointed out, this has been a successive governments that have not addressed this issue, and Kemi Badenoch doesn't have a leg to stand on because she doesn't support
But this
about the
one
Tories.
said
They've
it
got
would.
121 MPs. This is a government with a majority of 174.
There are two issues here. Whether it's right in principle to give the money, and then whether the government gave the wrong signals.
is
There are
right
two
in
separate things. But no, that's a separate argument, though. Because Badenoch, Farage,
Well,
I want to hear what they say about
cannot
the
deny Rachel
policy.
Reeves standing up with the photograph. We've seen the photograph.
That's the second issue I'm talking about. That's about the expectation management. It's not about the policy itself, is it? Because no party, as I understand it, is currently promising
the irony
to compensate these
of
women.
Liz Kendall holding the banner, the placard.
Yes.
Why sport was me? She was the one who stood up in the Commons.
But that's a bigger issue.
And
though.
shocked her colleagues.
That's a political expectation communications failure.
They didn't even
rather than
warn
policy.
the WASPI women in advance.
But he's talking technically here. This is people's lives we're talking about. They're not interested
I'm not
in your
talking-
policy.
no, I'm not
They're not
talking-
interested in how it sounds. They're interested in their lives and the money
I
that they've
understand
lost
that,
out
but
on.
what I'm saying is there are two separate issues that we're talking about here. One of them is whether it's right to pay these women, and no
And it
party,
is, and the Ombudsman said it is.
agreeing with that. As I understand, maybe the Lib Dems, I don't know. But the other issue is whether the Labour Party gave the expectation that they would.
Well, I don't know how you can deny that they gave the expectation.
So I think that what's really interesting here is I think it really gets to the heart of this rise of single issue politics. And we were talking about this in the last segment where, these campaign groups spring up, they're incredibly successful, sometimes have a lot of money behind them, and they persuade MPs to join their cause because it looks good for constituents, it looks like you're on the side of the people. Then you get into government and you realise that there isn't a magic money tree. The government's in a great amount.
The Lib Dems made the same mistake with tuition fees.
You have to make choices.
And what you realise, Maria, is that the politicians who do what you've just described, they don't care about people.
Exactly. So
they don't care about people.
I never, ever wore a badge. So we got given a different badge to wear every week at PMQs. I support this. I never wore anything apart from the poppy. Yeah. Because you don't know as an MP, hang on a minute, in 5 years' time, will I support this? Is this a good use of money? But this is where our politics is now because of social media clicks.
It shows that
if you don't support this cause, you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
And they will lie and cheat and do anything to get into power, and then when they're in power, they abuse it.
It's a terrible optic, Jonathan.
It's a terrible...
Look, I think it would have been worse if they'd made it an issue during the election campaign and sort of said, we're going to sort of support the WASPI women in writing this injunction. justice.
you lie beforehand, it's all
But
right.
it wasn't. But that would have been a lie. That would have been a
Well,
lie.
if
They
you
didn't
lie
lie.
beforehand,
They
before
didn't
the
lie.
election campaign starts.
Keir Starmer never gave a pledge that he was going to pay money.
He signalled that he would.
He
He
signalled,
signed a
but it
statement in
wasn't. It was.
2022
Yes.
supporting the WASPI women.
He said,
that was
"I don't
2 years
think
ago.
he never, as Labour leader, he's never said I commit to paying you
Well,
money."
now it's semantics. You're playing.
Well, I mean,
with
look,
words
you
now.
could.
We
yes,
spoke
politics,
to the
politics
leader.
is
We
that.
had it on this programme yesterday. The leader of the WASPI campaign. She said she feels utterly.
And I completely understand that, and I have a great sympathy for these women. I also think that when you are, as Miriam says, when you're a single issue politics, that's obviously going to be your
I think
overriding
it'd be-
concern.
I think-
But when you are in government and you have to deal with everything, then you have to think £10 billion is
Jonathan,
not
I think
an
this
acceptable use
feeds
of
into the
taxpayers' money.
narrative that Keir Starmer is slippery.
Yes, exactly. Completely.
I mean, you can
Can we
make
talk
that.
about Grace Dent now?
Very quickly.
I
very
don't think,
quickly.
unfortunately, well,
Can we not?
Very,
We
very
can do it in
quickly.
30 seconds.
Grace Dent has now, she's replaced Greg Wallace in MasterChef. So they've replaced him,
Yeah.
Boer, chauvinistic Boer, with a woman who was a part-time vegan, apparently, which I find quite astonishing.
Part-time vegan?
Part-time, well, you can't
Part-time.
be, can you? So
I'm a part-time vegan at lunchtime.
she's in this photograph looking like all,
Joan Collins in Dynasty.
whatever. And John Turot's desperately trying hard to smile and obviously can't do it. But this is, she's
Not a big fan, then we take it.
And what's her qualifications to actually judge other people's
She's a restaurant
cooking?
critic.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid that doesn't qualify
No, no.
you. But this is a woman who went into the jungle, do you remember?
And
Left
she
after
fled it.
15 days
Yeah.
because she couldn't be without her phone for that length of time. And also she said that living in the jungle gave her a clue of how difficult life was for people who had to live that way.
I think you should have been on it, MasterChef.
Well, no, I don't think I should have been on that either, but I don't think Grace Dent should have been.
No,
But anyway.
no. And what is a part-time vegan? I've never heard of that.
Well, there isn't such a thing, that's the point.
Yes, when you're eating a banana, you're a part-time
It's
vegan.
ridiculous.
Well, no,
Anyway.
Worst sort of virtue signal, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's completely...
Carol and
yeah.
Jonathan, thank you
BBC.
so much for a very lively debate. Now it's
Christmas,
time
Jonathan.
Happy Christmas, Andrew.
for your news headlines.